And during a town hall meeting in Fort Lauderdale yesterday, liberal protesters, in typical fashion, began heckling Representative Colonel Allen West. But the congressman, he wasn't fazed.
I just want to tell you that you're not going to intimidate me.
Now, that did not stop disrespectful liberals in the crowd. One who is reportedly a former Air America host was taken into police custody.
Nicole Sandler.
We're leaving. We're leaving.
I'm talking to the media. Can I get your name and badge number, please? Excuse me.
Whatever you need to do. You need to leave.
I'm out of here. Get your hand off of me!
Do not leave.
Get your hand off! Get your hand off of me!
You're under arrest.
Pretty funny. Joining me with the reaction, the man himself from the great state of Florida, the Sunshine State, Colonel Allen West. Congressman, how are you?
I'm doing very well, Sean. How are you this evening?
We're doing well. Well, it seems like that we got a little liberal astroturfing going on because this is happening to Paul Ryan and conservatives like yourself. I watched the entire tape, and I thought you handled it perfectly. What did you think?
Well, I suppose I did very well. I think the most important thing was I was not going to allow them to dominate the dialogue or take over our town hall meeting. And as I told them, I'm not the type of guy that's going to be intimidated, and I stand on facts and the truth, and that's what we're going to take to the people down here in Congressional District 22.
You know, look, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. I don't know who this, I'm in talk radio for 20-some-odd years. I don't even know who this person is, never heard of him. But obviously wanted to provoke some type of action. The police were very polite, said leave, didn't leave, got arrested. That's what happens. All right, let's go to an interview. This is Nancy Pelosi talking about people that showed up at town halls, Tea Party members. Here's what she said about them.
This initiative is funded by the high end. We call it AstroTurf. It's not really a grassroots movement. It's AstroTurf by some of the wealthiest people of America to keep the focus on tax cuts for the rich instead of for the great middle class.
All right, just a silly interpretation, just like I would assume this is one individual or there's a series of individuals that want to make a statement. What is how should people that disagree with congressmen, congresswomen at town halls, how do you think they should be going about asking their questions?
Well, I think that you have a process in place. For instance, with our town hall meetings, you're able to fill out a question card, and I address you by your name and, of course, the city that you're from. But the thing is, when you have websites that are up down here in South Florida that are kind of guiding people on how to go in and be an antagonist in our town hall meetings and to try to incite some type of reaction so that they can get a YouTube moment, you just got to be above that, and you got to be the one that's in control and not allow them to take over the town hall meeting. And I think that's what we were effective in doing.
Let me ask, were you happy with the 2011 budget deal, and what will it take to get you to vote for an increase in the debt ceiling?
Well, it's very simple. If we're going to talk about raising the debt ceiling, there are four very important spending control measures, as I call it. They have to be put in place. We've got to have a balanced budget amendment. We've got to cap federal government spending, I think, at 20%. That's historically where we should be. Right now, we're at 25% of our GDP, and it's going to grow. I think you have to look at our corporate business tax rate, which is 35%. We need to bring it down to 20 to 22%, take away all the loopholes and subsidies, but incentivize and encourage our businesses and corporations to come back to America and invest in Americans and hiring them. But the last and most important condition I think we need to have is a trigger control mechanism so that when you reach a certain percentage of the debt ceiling, there are automatic spending cuts that come in, because we don't need to keep doing this thing about raising the debt ceiling ever again.
Yeah. I understand that you spent some time recently with Donald Trump.
Yeah, well, he showed up at a Tea Party event that we had here in Boca Raton. I gave a speech. I kind of took the president to task on that speech that he gave, his Mulligan budget at George Washington University, and I was followed up by Mr. Trump.
Now, you were asked if you would join the ticket if asked with Mr. Trump, and your answer, you kind of left it wide open. There are some people that would like you to run for higher office one day. Would you consider that? And would you run with Donald Trump?
Well, I think the most important thing is this. We worked very hard to win this congressional election in 2010. And the most important thing I need to do is prove myself as a capable legislator and an American statesman and win a re-election in 2012. If God has something decided for me going down the road, I will always seek to continue my service to this great nation. But right now, I'm focused on being the best possible congressman I can be for the people in CD 22.
And if Donald Trump or anybody else asks you to run with them, your answer?
I think they got to go to the constituents and ask them if they're willing to let me out of the oath that I took to be their congressman first and foremost before I would ever say, yeah.
And if the consensus was yes, then you'd consider it. Then you'd say yes.
Then I would consider it possibly if the constituents here in CD 22 thought that as a possibility. But right now I'm focused on one thing, and that's to rectify the economic morass in which we find our country.
Thank you, Congressman. Appreciate it. I thought you handled that perfectly.
Thanks for having me, Sean. Let
not your heart be troubled. Our great, great, great American panel is next. And tonight on our great, great American panel, he is a Fox News legal analyst. The one and only Peter Johnson Jr. is back, and she was the national press secretary for Mike Huckabee's presidential campaign. Alice Stewart is with us, and he's a former NFL player, quarterback, founder, and chairman of OneMoreCustomer.com. The one and only Fran Tarkenton's here. Guys, good to see you all. Thanks for being here, Fran.
Good to be with you, Sean.
Appreciate it. Thanks for signing my football. I got a lecture last night. Apparently, Peyton Manning said I need that little gap in here.
You do. That's
because this way it spins, hits, and drops down, not up.
You can spin it better that way. You know, that's a big deal now. You can spin it.
Yeah, and people laugh. The reason I can't throw a real football is because I break the lights already with this football.
That's okay.
No one's charged me yet. All right, so we got this big issue involving the birth certificate.
Yeah.
And this was never a defining issue for me, but I found it odd. All the president had to do was what he did today. Release it, move on, and we're out of the way. Why did he wait so long?
Well, he said he came out because it was a distraction, and I think that he is probably going to want to go back and lose his birth certificate again because we know he doesn't have any plan to get more jobs, to cut the deficit in Libya or wherever. And so he might like that distraction in the future.
That's a good point.
And the problem is, first of all, it should have been done 2.5 years ago. But the fact he does it today, you know, was it a distraction? We had a major shift in the national security team. We had Bernanke talking about the economy. And he's up there, admittedly, talking about something he himself calls silly. If it's so silly, then why engage in it? Put your press secretary out there. If, as a press secretary, they put me out there to talk about the silly stuff and let the candidate or the president do the important things.
And my hope, Sean, is that it was released in good faith, that it's not about victimology. Is the president becoming a victim of the press, of the Republican Party, of free-thinking Americans, and does he do this to elicit sympathy from his base voters in a way that's not useful in American politics? That's my concern, whether there's some deeper plan that goes on here.
That's an interesting thought. Look, I always want to stay on the big issues because I believe the battle over conservatism and liberalism, I think conservatives win. And I think we are literally in the midst of a decline of this country that I love, and I believe that America can come back, but it's got to have some really stark, dramatic changes at the top, and that means he has to be defeated in 2012.
We need leadership that'll solve problems. We got some real fundamental problems in this country, and the deficit is right at the top. Jobs are right at the top, and we need leaders, Republican, Democrat, or whatever, that are going to face these challenges and come up with solutions.
Well, why isn't he working? Peter, you're a Democrat. Why are his like, for example, people are now saying it's racist if you bring up the birth certificate. It's racist if you talk about him playing basketball. All the silliness, he needs time to focus on issues, and he runs off to see Oprah.
That's got to stop.
Yeah.
That's really bad for the American narrative and for the American people. I understand racism in politics. I worked for the first African-American mayor in New York City, and sometimes he was the victim of racism in this city, and he did great things for people going forward in this country. But the president has to be a big person going forward, and it can't be about race, and it can't be about allowing other people to cast those stones, because the president is too smart to do it himself, and I don't believe in his heart that he thinks it's true. Yep. But that cannot be the narrative.
Well, let me play Tavis Smiley, and then I'll let you respond first. This is Tavis Smiley, and Whoopi Goldberg said it today, and an NBC commentator said it as well. Let's listen to what he says.
I said over a year ago that this presidential race, Lawrence, was going to be the ugliest, the nastiest, the most divisive, and the most racist in the history of this republic. I did not know that that race to the bottom would begin so quickly.
Now, America voted for an African-American president.
Yeah, this will not be any more racist than the last one wasn't. We elected our first African-American president, and it's not about race, it's about his failed policies. The Tavis Smileys and the Whoopi Goldbergs of the world throw out the race card because they don't want to talk about the issues. They don't want to talk about what an incompetent president we have leading us on a path to an economic meltdown. And it's not about the color of his skin, it's about the content of his policies, which are failing.
He can't run on his record. He can't run.
Well, you know, I really feel bad that Tavis Smiley and Whoopi Goldberg feel as they do. I work in a world and work with hundreds of thousands of entrepreneurs. They're black, they're white, they're Hispanic, they're male, they're female, they're old, they're young. They don't talk about this. You know what they talk about? How in the world can I get one more customer today? How can I make my business work? How can I pay my employees? How can I meet my payroll? That's what they're thinking.
There has to be measured talk, and there has to be measured thinking. You can't have this incendiary, self-fulfilling prophecy. You cannot make a statement like that on national television and not understand that it's going to have consequences and that people respond to that in ways that are destructive. And we don't need that in this country.
And at the end of the day, if all the liberals and the Democrats have to play in this game is the race card, they might as well fold up now and push away from the table, because we're going to have an economic conservative person elected in 2012 that's going to get out of this economic mess.
All right, we're going to come back. We'll talk about a controversy we discussed last night on the program, and that has to do with the church that Barack Obama, the president, and his family attended on Easter Sunday. More with our great American panel straight ahead. And we continue with our great American panel. All right, so we had this whole controversy over the Reverend Jeremiah Wright, and the president went to church, Dr. Wallace Charles Smith, Easter Sunday. Shouldn't think it's a problem. Only this is what he said about Fox News, talk radio, comparing it to Jim Crow.
It may not be Jim Crow anymore. Now Jim Crow wears blue pinstripes, goes to the law school and carries fancy briefs and cases. And now Jim Crow has become James Crow Esquire. And he doesn't have to wear white robes anymore, because now he can wear the protective cover of talk radio, or can get a regular news program on Fox.
All right, now he said that I believe in 2010, and this was him, remember, after the Jeremiah controversy. Jeremiah Wright said nothing wrong. GD America, America's chickens have come home to roost after 9/11, the U.S. KKK of A, he doesn't have a problem with. Let's roll the tape.
I've been reading with interest the things that Mr. Obama has had to face, as he has been vilified by the right-wing press. I've read with interest as he was forced to turn on his pastor and friend and mentor prior to becoming president, but now it's maintained to his presidency. And Jeremiah Wright, with all due respect to anybody who may mightily disagree with me, Jeremiah Wright never said anything that was wrong. Amen. What he said was that America owes some dues for its racist and its sexist and its classicist background.
Is there no other church that he could have gone to? Who's vetting this for the president?
As a matter of national interest and as a matter of civil dialogue, the president is compelled to deny, disavow, and demand that he not sit through these things anymore. And
well, in fairness, he didn't sit through that, but this is the minister who said these things recently.
Well, he sat through a sermon allegedly based on some blog entries of reporters where this minister was talking about slaves and 3/5 membership as persons
about his grandson
in the Constitution. Yeah. And so how do you understand and know that and not speak out against it in the national interest?
You would like to think that they would have known that. But maybe the president thinks this is a step up. Reverend Wright, who he sat in his church for 20 years, said, GD America. This preacher only said that about conservatives. So maybe the president thinks this is a step in the right direction.
What does it tell us about him? I mean,
well, you know, I respect his right to go worship wherever he wants to worship. But we are known by who we hang out with. And the people he hangs out with in the two churches that we know, the one in Washington and the one in Chicago, are a problem for me and problem for most people that I talk to, whether they're Democrat or Republican or liberal or conservative. And it's just an unfortunate thing.
You know, on one hand, we'd like to be glad that he did finally go to church. I think he's been 4 or 5 times since he's been president. But at the same time, he didn't issue an Easter proclamation. He did issue a proclamation for Ramadan for the Muslims, but he didn't issue one for Christians. And between that and sitting in another church service with this kind of speech, it says a lot.
People's faith are people's faith, and I respect that. But when you hear garbage, the kind of filth that's spewing here, when you invoke Jim Crow and you say that there is this corporate institutional racism, and it includes Fox News, and that there are people that have regular news programs on Fox News who are racists.
It's outrageous.
It's outrageous. It's wrong. And it's hurtful. And it's hurtful, of course, to the people at Fox News, but it's hurtful to the American people. That's not the debate we should be talking about.
But there's a bigger question here. He has a science czar that believes in compulsory population control. He has another czar that thinks animals should have rights. He has another czar who's a avowed communist 9/11 truther. He's got another czar that thinks America should adopt Sharia law.
Well, when you're talking about redistribution, when you're talking about a foreign policy in tatters in Libya and Afghanistan, when you're talking about a debt spiraling out of control, when you're talking about unemployment that is unabated, when you're talking about a loss of confidence in the presidency and in this nation, when you're talking about abject failure and abject hopelessness, not only in the African-American community, but in all communities, then we have a serious problem in this country.
And even more so, that kind of speech, there's no place for that anywhere, but certainly not in a church.
Absolutely not.
We're out of time. Fran Tarkenton's going to throw us out.
All right.
All right, there you go.
There you
And
go.
that's all the time we have left. Greta's next.